we will continue the introduction of the Dynamod E-invoice module by Vivienne. She will walk us through the features and benefits of this module and how it can streamline your invoicing process. Let's welcome Vivienne.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So for next presenting, it will take around 20 to 30 minutes. I understand, I think you all are going to lunch now or is hungry now, but give me later time, I will explain it in faster way, okay? So let us start now. Okay, so just now Mr. Simon also explained that for some of the department, especially the HR, account, and the billing department, maybe need to come out with a new policy to how we issue the e-invoice. Okay, so this you must do the preparation. And I know many meeting will be coming out. Okay, and next for our system. So our system, I understand many few of our customer here is still using the Smart SQL, and unfortunately, the Smart SQL will not have the e-invoice function. So for Dynamod, the e-invoice will implement in the Dynamod latest version. Okay, so for our customer that using the Dynamod now, you just need to make sure your cover is still in the valid date, and you can contact our support to upgrade to latest version to enjoy the e-invoice function. Okay. Next. Okay, for your preparation, the e-invoice require 55 columns and the 55 fields in every invoice. So before we issue the invoice, we have to prepare your own company, your supplier, and maybe your buyer as well. Your buyer also need to you need to get the info from your buyer or your customer. Okay. You can do in two ways to get the info. One is you can contact your customer and get their info and fill in the Excel file. And another method, you can use the URL link to update the customer info. So this function is available now. You can contact our support for how we start up the function. Okay. If you need our support to prepare the checklist for you, you also can contact to us as well, because we have the template. We can export out in Excel and provide you the template list so you can get the info and fill in the Excel list, and we can update into the Dynamod. Okay. So this one I will skip because I believe just now Mr. Simon have presented it. Okay, and the next one, just now have mentioned the classification code for the products and the service. So for every item or products in your Dynamod, you have to classify the item code. So once you upgrade the latest version in our Dynamod, we have one default classification code that is 022. Okay, the 022 is classified in others categories. So up to now, the government have 45 products code, the classification code. So you have to make sure all your products, it belongs to which classification ID. Okay, this one you also can do in Excel and update into our system. We also can provide you the template to update in the system. Okay, next. For the e-invoice credential, because if you're using our system, the Dynamod system, to do the e-invoice submission, you have to make sure you do the intermediary system from your My Invoice portal, so that the My Invoice portal, once you allow us, Okay, then we can do the setting from the Dynamod system. And then from our Dynamod system, we can help you to do the integration to the My Invoice portal. Okay. Next. So since you now will start to do the collection, you can email to your customer or you can use the Google form to collect the data. Okay, this is the method I mentioned just now to use the Google form, or you can use the URL link to update the data information. So this method you can contact us later. We can explain more for you because it's not in the slide now. Okay. Okay. Next, let me explain for the full picture in Dynamod. Okay, for our Dynamod, for retail part, we have a touch post system which will sync the cashiers back to the Dynamod. Okay, for this part, right, we also will install one new plugin called SEP. So that this SEP function will integrate the E-invoice data to the touch post. So I will explain at behind later. Let me go to the setup first. So for the setup part, just now I mentioned customer data, your supplier data, and your own company data. And next, also your products classification. For all this setup, once we do the setting from the Dynamod, so we can ready to do the e-invoice submission. So next, we will have the report and dashboard for you to check which e-invoice is not submitted yet and which e-invoice have the validation error or some e-invoice maybe is expired. Okay, because they have a rule is 72 hours. So if the invoice over 3 days, you are not able to do the submission. So our dashboard also will notify the info for you. And it will have a countdown time, how many days left, then you have to do the submission before that. Okay. And of course, we have the email alert, which need to setting up to do the submission. Okay, next for the transaction part. So which transaction will allow us to do the e-invoice submission? First, customer invoice, of course, and second, the cash sales. So the cash sales part, we will consolidate it at the month end or the next beginning of month to do the e-invoice, consolidated e-invoice submission. Okay, and of course, credit note, debit note, refund note, and the self-bill invoice. These all are ready in the latest version in Dynamod. Okay. Next. Okay. The list of invoice rejection. If you have customer request the reject, then you will see from our dashboard which invoice they was request for rejection. Okay. So all the e-invoice function, we will connect the LHDN API to do the submission. So let us go inside the Dynamod system. I show you some print screen. This is the latest version, which will include the e-invoice module. Okay, you can see from the menu here, this is the new e-invoice function. We're showing out to you once we activate the e-invoice. Okay. After our support team upgrade for you, or you can upgrade yourself to the latest version. And from the company system setting, we enable the e-invoice Malaysia. So once we enable, we have to make sure which month we will start to do the submission. It depends on your which implementation date. Okay. So once we activate it, you can see all the menu from the e-invoice menu from our system menu. all our e-invoice code table and the MSID code or maybe the classification code. Okay, all this code will be ready in the Dynamod. You don't need to create yourself because we straight away connect to the LHDN API to get the latest info. Okay, next, for your own company business setup, okay, from the company module part, you can see the E-invoice tab from your Dynamod. So the E-invoice tab, you need to key in the correct and with the correct spelling, your company name and your tax number, the TIN number, and your registration number. Okay. Next, if you have outlets, then for the outlets, we also need to key in all the supplier info, which this one can be copied from your company info. And supplier setup and the customer page also will have the e-invoice tab. So all the compulsory field the necessary field from the e-invoice, we have to key in all the info accordingly. But I believe some supplier or some customer, they are not provided the MSIC code, or maybe they are not provided the SST number. So this one, we can let it blank first. So if the system will allow you to save also, but this is not the compulsory field lah. Okay. Like just now we mentioned that if your customer only provide the TIN number and without the IC number, also a system will allow to do the submission. Or if the customer only provide the IC number and is without the TIN number, the system also will allow to do the submission. Okay. So this part is for customer and supplier setup. And next, this is the product classification maintenance page. Is the new tab from the stock maintenance that is e-invoice. So this e-invoice, we need to classify the ID, and is this item is with 6% tax or X% SST tax, we have to classify in the tax ID also. If not applicable, then just choose for this code 06. So all this code, you can use the percentage to check lah. Because our system, we can use the percentage to check what is the code provided from the LHDN. So our system will follow the LHDN code and we can do the setup accordingly. Okay. For this item origin country, the item origin country we stated here, that means your item is supplied from which country. If your supplier is from Malaysia, then just Malaysia. It's not it's not on your product, because I believe some product maybe is made in Vietnam and made in China. So you don't need to mention the product is from which country. You just mention the stock that you get is from which country. Okay. So let us continue. So just now we mentioned about the supplier page, the customer page, and the product setup. So next is the chart of account. So chart of account, because some we have to do the self-bill invoice. So and some reimbursement, I believe that need to do the self-bill invoice as well. And so here the chart of account, you have to put the classification code as well and the tax type ID. So just like I mentioned, once we upgrade to the latest version, the item classification ID default is classified into the 022 code. So if you need to edit and change to the other classification code, you can do from the chart of account maintenance page. Okay, next. And just now the page I show you, the customer supplier, you can edit or add in one by one, or we can use the Excel. So if we use the Excel, we can provide the template for you. And once you update all the info in your Excel template, the customer, the supplier, and the location, we can do the bulk update. So we have utilities for you to do the bulk update into the Dynamod. Just import into the Dynamod using the Excel template. Okay. So the Excel template, let me repeat again for this because some of the participants just joined in. Okay. For the customer, supplier, location, and the stock item, we can use the Excel template to do the import. Okay. So once we import the Excel into the Dynamod, all the info will be updated accordingly. Next is the tax payable team validation. So once we all import into the Dynamod, the supply info, the customer info, and the stock, the stock classification will no need to do the validate, but for customer and supplier, because we're not sure they provide the correct TIN number. So once our API connect to the LHDN, we can use the TIN validation page to validate the info that provided by our customer is correct or not. So we have this page to refresh and get all the to validate all the info from our system, to validate with LHDN API to see whether the info is correct or not. So if the info is correct, the success tick will be tick here. Okay, here will be blue color tick here. So if error, then will be left with blank. It will keep blank, and you have to contact back to your customer or supplier to get the correct TIN number. Okay, next, this is the e-invoice submission menu. We can do the e-invoice profile, and we can do the invoice simulation and do the validation. So let me explain the profile first. It's like a physical year. Okay, once the period is created, the period is month by month. Let's say you started on January, then you will have one profile date from 1st of January 2025 until the 31st of January 2025. And the status here will be open. But at the next month, on the February, once you do all the submission, you have to come back this page and do the log. Okay, you have to close this period in case your user edit again the transaction. So this one you have to take note, yeah. And next, this is the e-invoice simulation page. Is allow you to check which invoice is still open status. That means is not do any submission yet. And some you can push to from open, you can push to the ready to submit. And we have the process manager to help you to do the auto submission. Okay, the auto submission document will be queued here, ready to do the submit. And here in validation, that means the document already submit to the LHDN, to the My Invoice portal. Okay. Cancellation means we have a document was submit and then we do the cancellation again. So you can check from here why the document is do the cancellation. And some e-invoice is not entitled to do the submission, that is not applicable, like to the government or maybe the Shopee and Lazada invoice, because the Shopee and Lazada, they already submit on behalf of us. So we no need to do the submission on that document, and it will parking here lah for the document, not applicable. And if you already over 3 days, no do any submission yet, will become the expired. So you can check the list here. Okay. Next. So once the invoice is submitted, you can see from every single customer invoice page will have this e-invoice tab. And here will show the status is validated and success. That means already submit to the My Invoice portal. Okay. Once we do the validated e-invoice format will have 55 fields. You can see this, I believe some of the screen is small, but you can zoom it. Here is the unique identifier number, and here we'll have the digital signature. Okay, this is the validated success invoice. We'll have all this info. And this is the consolidated e-invoice format. So at the end of the month or the next beginning of the month, we do the consolidated. Once we do all the submission, you can see the document, because you can see the description here, 1110 to 1112 actually is the document number. And you can see this is a 1114. Okay, why the 1113 is missing? Because some of the cash sales, the customer is request for e-invoice. So when that cash sales we submit as the e-invoice, it will not include in the consolidated e-invoice. We only will consolidate the cash sales that not yet do any submission. Okay, system will auto capture which cash sales not yet do the e-invoice and consolidated it to do the submission. Okay, I have one question here. For consolidated e-invoice, the description should be the receipt or transaction number, right? Yes, the description here is the receipt number. Okay. Next, for customer that using POS system, that using our touch POS, so here maybe you can listen. So for our touch POS, because on your retail shop, the customer sometimes will request for e-invoice. So if they request for e-invoice, we can go to the reprint receipt page. We will see the e-invoice button here. Okay, the invoice button here to allow your staff to ask the buyer what is your company name and what is the IC, or if they claim for personal purpose, they can choose for the normal name and the IC number. Okay, for this part, right, it will cause your cashier have a long queue. So actually, we have another method which is called SEP function. The SEP function is our POS can print out the receipt with the QR code. Okay, the QR code will allow your customer to scan the QR by themselves, and they will go to this page to fill in their own company name or personal name, and what is the registration type is by IC, or if by company is BRN number. Okay, they can scan and get the e-invoice by themselves. Okay, how does it work? So the customer will link to the SEP function, which is connect back to the Dynamod. And once they key in all the details, the Dynamod will save all the info and push it to the LHDN API. So once the API, all the info is correct and success validated, it will return back the e-invoice. So if using this method, your cashier will not have the long queue. Okay. this is my last sharing slide. So I have another question here. If customer purchase a product, then later or on the following day, the request for a refund or change of goods, how does we report this transaction under consolidated e-invoice? Actually, from your POS system, you just do the refund transaction as usual. Okay, you just do the transaction as usual because for our consolidated e-invoice, it will compile all the amount. It will compile all the amount and do the consolidated. Will Dynamod automatically submit our invoice to the e-invoice portal? Yes, you can group all the e-invoice that still open status, and we can plugin into the ready to submit page. So ready to submit page, the automation will do the job. So the process manager will get which invoice is not do the submission yet and do the upload. Oh, for your refund, right? Actually, is another new document number. So actually, the document number will be continued. It's a new transaction number. Okay, welcome. Okay, so let me compile for our Dynamod. The latest version will ready for the e-invoice module. And for the POS system, of course, we have to go to the latest version as well. And please take note, for the latest version of the Touch POS and Touch F&B, the interface will be different as well. Okay, the interface, the colors and some button, the payment button is have little bit changes. So we can share the file to you later. We will email to you according your email registered for the info of the touch post. Okay, if the Shopee and Lazada sales we don't need to submit, then we just don't put under the submission. Okay, because we will create the invoice as well, and we can choose the type, the e-invoice type to not applicable. So those documents will no need to do the submission. Okay. If employees submit their claim under their own name, how we want to convert our self-bill under their own name? Want to convert to our self-bill. I think for this, you need to practice the employee do the submission under the company name instead their own name. Okay, but I believe some is like when they visit the doctor, they have their own name, right? So maybe this one, let me ask Mr. Simon later how we convert it to self-bill. Let me take note on this. And next, for us, which we have such giant ERP integration, Lazada, Shopee, TikTok, yes. Will Dynamod know which to submit for e-invoice? Okay, for this part, let me go back to the customer page. Okay, because we will have create a car file for Shopee, Lazada, and TikTok, right? So you can see here the customer page. Inside the e-invoice type, here have one tick. Okay, not applicable for e-invoice. We can tick here for your Shopee and Lazada because we know that they already do the submission for us. So the system, I believe, the Dynamod system will auto create the online transaction, and the online transaction will auto belongs to not applicable for e-invoice. So Dynamod will know those documents no need to do submission. From the car file there, we can do the settings straight away, do the setting from the car file. Okay, broadcast. So can you summarize what we need to do end of each month apart from login previous month? Okay. At the month end, first, if you with touch post system, right, you have to make sure all your post system cash sales back to the Dynamod. Okay. This is the first one, the most important one. All the sales need to back to the Dynamod. So secondly, once we do the consolidated, so we have to upload the consolidated. Once we upload the consolidated e-invoice and the normal e-invoice, we have to lock the period. So anything you can contact to our office. For the e-invoice, you can contact to me, Vivienne, and Wei, and also Roseanne. Okay. That's all for today. So anything you can contact us. Thank you so much.